What is going on, all you awesome super aficionados? This is the Heroes and Mutants podcast, brought to you by Higher Passion Entertainment. I just want to give a huge shout out because our old co-host is joining us today as a guest. So thank you so much to Eric for coming back and
Yeah, of
hopping on.
course.
Thank
Happy
you,
to be
bro.
here.
And I just want to give a huge apology to everybody. I know we were supposed to do reviews for The Flash and for Across the Spider-Verse. Things got a little hectic and work was very stressful for me, and I wasn't really in the right state of mind to really just pick up. Like, things were kind of going on and I just didn't exactly have the passion to be like, oh, we're gonna do this right now, and I was just in the middle of something. So I'm just glad to pick things back up again, and sorry that the wait had been taking so long, but we're here now, so let's get into it today.
Yep.
So obviously for today we're going to be covering TMNT Mutant Mayhem, and it was interesting because I remember when this film was announced back in 2020. I think this was like right when we started and right when the pandemic first hit. And what we had known was that Seth Rogen was going to be developing, producing an animated film. And then when that concept art was released back, I think it was like summer 2020, around that
Yeah.
time, there was like, I think it was even like the Technodrome was in the back. So I was kind of definitely give me a lot of vibes and a lot of hints of like the 87 cartoon. But I
Yep.
remember just seeing the animation style and how the turtles looked. Like I think all of us were a little baffled by it because it didn't look good and it didn't really
It
seem
looked
like our forte.
unfinished.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
It just looked like they just looked very weird, and it just was
Yeah.
something that I think we were all approaching with a hint of skepticism. The thing for me where I actually was on board with it, where I said to me it sounds like a good idea, was the whole Seth Rogen talking about approaching it from that teenage aspect, because obviously that's not really something that we've seen pursued so much with the TMNT and media. Like obviously that's
Mhm.
part of the namesake, and that's the first part of the teenage of the TMNT. But we'd never really seen that fully explored or flushed out. Maybe with the exception of like, I think the animated film, or no, I'm trying to. It hasn't really been covered as much. This whole thing with like about the four actors are all teenagers, so I think that was like a cool way for them to make this franchise feel unique and fresh in perspective. But what about you, Bo? When you first heard this was announced, were you skeptical, or what? Was there anything that was redeeming for you, where I said, okay, this sounds like it'll be an
Yeah.
interesting project for them to take on?
I mean, when I first heard of it, I wasn't sure what Seth Rogen was gonna do with it. Firstly, I was hoping it wasn't gonna be like rated R, and he was just gonna like throw everything at this movie, and so I guess that was why I was a little skeptical about it, and just like the names behind it. I think sometimes when you see so many big names cast, you get kind of like a hesitancy of like, how good is this really? Like, especially when we started hearing, oh, Ice Cube's gonna be in it, and then you have like Post Malone and
Jackie Chan.
Jackie Chan, and like, I'm like, are they making up for like a bad story and just trying to put in good actors, right, and big names to get this going? And also with the recent movies that had come out at the time, I think the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the like live action movies, I do like them, and I watched them with my son, and I think they were fun. But they weren't anything like spectacular, right? They're not something I keep watching on repeat. I'd rather go back to like the cartoons, right?
Mhm.
And watch those. And at the time I was also reading the Last Ronin comic book,
Oh yeah, for
the one
sure.
that you recommended it, and I was like, all right, is it gonna be kind of a darker take on the turtles, or is it gonna be like more comedic? And you know, with Seth Rogen is gonna be more comedic, so I was just hoping it didn't go too far in the other direction, right?
Definitely
So I think that was my hesitancy with the movie at first when I first heard about it,
makes sense.
and how they were gonna do it.
But really, what really saved it for me, where I really started investing in it, saying like, I think this is going to be a good thing, was when that trailer first came out. Obviously, it's set
Mhm.
to a Tribe Called Quest, Can I Kick It? Like, man, that
Yeah,
was like so cool, and just hearing their voices and how they interacted with each other, I think that really calmed a lot of my doubts and said, I think I'm gonna like this. I think this is gonna be good.
yeah.
The thing was like, oh, go ahead.
I would say, granted, I think when you see any like fight scene with hip hop, it just brings you back to like Wu-Tang and all that. And in my mind, it just hip hop and martial arts just go so well together that
Mhm.
I was like you when I saw that trail. I'm like, okay, they know what they're doing. They're kind of they understand their audience in this, right? And I thought, and then that just goes to one of my favorite scenes in the movie. But we can touch on that
Yeah,
later.
yeah,
But
we'll
yeah,
definitely touch on
yeah,
that.
seeing that trailer, and I think that that kind of eased my mind a bit, because you also got a lot of the animation style that they were going for, and I can see now why, like the first previews that we saw, why those looked so like sketched out and like unfinished, because of the final product. It kind of was was foreshadowing what we were gonna see, right?
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that really stood out for me in watching this was just that fact of the direction that they took the animation style. Because obviously we see the inspiration coming from Into the Spider-Verse, but here I
Mm-hmm.
don't fully feel like it's like like ripped off from it, or like you
Mm-mm.
can see that little hint of the inspiration, but they did something that was unique and its own with it. And then the one thing that I had seen was the production designer Yashar Kassi had talked about it. He said, "We ride the fine line between stupid and good. We try not to take ourselves or the characters we design too seriously, but instead infuse every aspect of the movie with teenage energy. This wasn't easy trying to draw like teenagers meant drawing like someone in their first art class ever or who's doodling in the corner of your notebook." So I think that was like the inspiration where they took like you have the obviously Into the Spider-Verse came out and changed the whole dynamic about everything with animation with the whole 3D and then 2D aspect in relation with each other. And then their thing like, okay, we're gonna do that, but then we're also gonna have things not be perfect or to have things be perfectly symmetrical or have these beautiful lines with characters are going to be kind of ugly. The world is going to be a little bit gritty in a sense, and we're it's going to be pretty much like a teenager drawn in a sketchbook or in its notebook in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I even think you can see that, like you see some of those characters, like their faces are off, you know, one ear is bigger
Yeah.
than the other, or like one side of their face is bigger. So I think that was a pretty smart idea that they went with, and you can definitely see like where that inspiration came from. And harkening back to this whole thing, we're going to focus on the teenage aspect of the Ninja Turtles. So, what about you?
Yeah.
Did the animation style did it work for you, or was it something that was a little bit too weird?
Yeah, it stood out. So at first it was almost distracting, because I'm just like dissecting it, right? And I'm like, what is this animation? It almost looks like claymation at times. And then when you look
Stop
at the,
stop motion, yeah, they
yeah,
did
like
some
stop motion,
stop
yeah.
motion sometimes too.
And then when you look at the backgrounds, so like the buildings look unfinished. Like some of the windows were literally just scribbles. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. It's just like almost like some comics that you read look like this, right? Where like the main focus, the superhero, whoever's in the front of the page, and then the back is just blurs, and especially when you see like sketches, like first renditions of issues, you'll see the background just being scribbled out like that. And I think they were really taking that in and into consideration and trying to do something new, some new art styles, because not everything had to be perfect. You didn't have to see perfect lines, or even in like their movements. I feel like from scene to scene there was different animation styles that they were really going for, and kind of letting the artists run wild with what they thought would fit best with that scene.
Definitely. And
Yeah,
further
so
talking about that too, the obviously we already knew this, but it was just cool to kind of hear the director talking about it. Jeff Rowe said that the film's aesthetic was inspired by patterns and colors of the late '80s and early '90s films, especially the films of Spike Lee and the underground New York hip hop era of that time. So I'm definitely getting a lot of like Kid and Play vibes from that.
yeah.
And Rowe also said this is a subtle way to include '80s nostalgia without having the turtle shout "Turtle Power" or "Cowabunga" every 5 minutes.
Cowabunga.
So, which we did definitely did hear towards the end of the film, but
Yeah.
it was cool in that sense that they definitely had a. I think the thing that really knocks it home for me or makes it redeeming for me is the fact you can definitely sense that this is made with a lot of passion, a lot of creativity, and a lot of drive to make something good. Like this is something that's been around. This IP has been around for almost 40 years, but how do you reinvent it in a way that you harken back to its past and you show
Mhm.
respect for what came before, but then you also try to do something new and creative and fresh. So I think this film really did a good balance with all of that.
Yep. Yeah, it does. And I don't know, it just it kind of had something for everyone, right? Like I went and watched it with my son, right? He's 4. And obviously like I looked into like why is it rated what it's rated, right? And like mostly because of the violence. So it's like, okay. And I caught myself laughing like throughout the movie, and he would ask like, why are you laughing? And like I explained it to him. And then sometimes I would just catch him laughing and I'd be like, why is he laughing? Like what just happened? And it's just interesting how they're touching, obviously, like they have those 80s and 90s um call outs that I'll catch, and then but then they also have little things that he can enjoy and he
Mm,
loves to see, right?
exactly.
And I was like, this is perfect to, like, especially with like father son bonding, right? Like
Exactly. Like I
it
think
was perfect to
the
take
biggest
him
thing
to.
that was a call out mainly to us millennials and people our age is definitely the whole Donatello making that line about Michelangelo's head looking like a cross like Stewie and Hey Arnold had a
Hey
baby, and like
Arnold, yeah.
I literally busted up like every time I had seen that. That was so,
Yeah.
you know,
Or
like these go for it.
at the very beginning, and I thought this was really funny when you first see the turtles and they have like their old school like just white eyes and they're super serious and standing on top of the building. I was like, oh, is this gonna be like darker, right? And I was like, but it can't be, obviously, because of the
Yeah.
trailers. And
Yeah,
then
like that. Yeah.
and then they start making fun of Leo for making his voice like Batman, and obviously referring to Batman. And my son just Toby just starts cracking up. He's like, ah, they're making fun of him. He does sound like Batman. And I was like, all right, like he gets that reference too. And it's just, I don't know, it's just like funny across the board. And all these like references to so much pop culture just like throughout the decades is insane. So
Definitely, because
yeah,
I think
it
in
was
that
fun.
whole little scene alone, like they talk about, like, yeah, hey, people are cool. They're like, yeah, you know, Tom Brady, Drake, and I think they
Yeah.
mentioned something about Adele and all of that,
Oh
and
yeah, they're talking about it though.
they went to go see Ferris Bueller's Day Off at the outdoor showing in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So that was a cool thing because I remember like that shot of them perched on the rooftop with the moonlight in the background with the white eyes and the serious expressions. Like
Yeah.
that was one of the first things that was released in terms of shots from the trailer. So when I had seen that,
Hmm.
it definitely reminded me of like the early Mirage comics run where they all had like that look and the serious expression. So the fact like, all right,
When the
guys, we're gonna
comic
do
books
this on
were,
today's, yeah,
yeah,
we're gonna
when they
do
were
this.
still black and white.
And then the fact of like,
Yeah.
as soon as he starts, as he reads like, we're all right, our dangerous mission involves Gogurt, and then it goes
Yeah.
back into like just the original, like the regular art style.
Yeah.
Like that was a pretty way to kind of where I was talking about the whole like harken like a way to kind of subtly nod the past, but do it in a kind of
Hmm.
fun and a bit of a parody kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's
I liked it a lot. Yeah.
yeah, man, it was really enjoyed that, and that was a cool thing that they did. But let's get into the story. Yeah, so when everything picks up, and I think the cool thing about it is they really get the sense that these kids it was a really interesting way that they harken back like their whole isolation between feeling like what a teenager would feel and this whole sense of belonging and oh man, I long for something else, I long for something more. So I also thought like that was a pretty, it wasn't exactly like the most, it wasn't something that was like, oh my god, this is a so unique way, but it was a way to like, you know what, this is something simple, let's go with this and let's run with that and let's go back to what they want and what they desire and what they long for. So I feel like that was like a cool way to kind of really show like that teenage aspect also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that they did really well in this film is keep it, like, for lack of a better term, like stupid simple, right? It's like
Yeah.
they just want to be accepted. That's the whole premise. Let's go with that. And I think at some point, um Splinter even, like, he's explaining like how they became like the mutants that they are, and he even mentions like it's easier to understand if you don't think about it. And I think that
It's
was
like
just
it doesn't make sense,
yeah,
but
but
it's okay.
it's the story. Like, let's move on. And I think the whole movie kind of has that to it, where it's like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Like their first fight, they take down a whole gang. I was like, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's TMNT. Why not? Right. And as they're going through the whole film, it gets more and more ridiculous. But I think it just you just go back to that statement that he made. It's like, if you think about it too much, there's no fun in it, right? But you
Definitely,
just move on from there. And I think that's what they were really going for, and they did a really good job at that, at just like bringing on the ridiculousness and just keeping us entertained the whole time.
definitely, for sure. And going off of that too, I really just appreciated everything about like how everything was structured and all of the silliness and like everything like that. It was just a cool thing that they done. And like I said, like I'm already going into it. I'm like, I think I'm gonna like this movie. And the way
Yeah.
the story was all set up, and then Jackie Chan really knocks it out of the park as Splinter. Like I think that was
Oh
like
yeah.
probably one of those castings that I heard that I was like, man, that's just perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the casting for the turtles themselves was perfect too. I think it is the first time that they've had actual teenagers cast as the turtles, right?
Definitely.
And and me being someone who works with youth, I like some of their conversations that they were having, like I'm like that just sounds so correct for like the youth nowadays. And it's like I've gone on like retreats with the guys and like I hear how they talk in the cabins and stuff. And just the way that the turtles were interacting with each other, they got it right. They got it right. This is definitely how they make fun of each other. This is definitely how they work together. And I think that goes back to really good casting and just really good writing and just getting the right actors together to portray these characters. It made a lot of sense.
Mhm.
And really focusing on the teenage aspect of the turtles and kind of that wanting to belong that they had, which a lot of teenagers go through. And we don't only see that through the turtles in the movie, we see that through April, right? And it's just they did a really good job at that, and I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. It was also pretty smart that we see Superfly as essentially a dark reflection of Splinter, like what
Mm,
Splinter possibly could have became if he went down that route, or if he was the one to possibly continue in his viewpoints of the humans and the world on top. We definitely could have seen, and like that's when he has like that point of clarity when Superfly is telling him to help him, and he's seeing like, oh, it was like, was this somebody like I could have possibly came? Is this somewhere where
yeah,
I could have passed on those same kind of teachings and that same kind of attitude to my boys? And him making that decision to help them as opposed to helping him out. Well,
yeah,
helping out Superfly, I meant.
yeah. Again, it's just really good writing, and I didn't really catch that. I'm not great at catching these things, but I didn't really catch the similarities between Superfly and Splinter at first, and then but they just very purposely have Superfly say something that Splinter said earlier. And I forgot what the quote was, right? But it was something like you can't trust the humans or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was something
And
like
and
that.
and you immediately see Splinter's face, his reaction. He's like, "Oh man, that's exactly what I said." And it's just him figuring it out at the same time as me being the audience figuring it out was really it's just really good writing. And I thought that was really clever the way they did it because then Splinter realizing that he needs to change, he needs to let the turtles like be the heroes they want to be and also be part of a society and kind of pushing the movie along from that point was really was it just it was really good. and
Definitely.
and I like that aspect of it because at first I could see myself as a parent. I identify with Splinter and I'm like, okay, no, he's just trying to protect them, what he's doing is right. But I could also see the reverse, like when I was younger I wanted to get out of the house and do whatever I wanted to do, right? And just I guess I have a different perspective of it now, but at the same time like you still see the growth in the characters throughout because the turtles start to understand where he's coming from as their
Definitely.
dad, right?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, man, that was great to see, and even like some of those action sequences are really good. I was actually
Oh
surprised, just like
man,
the no diggity fight scene definitely has to
that is
be
my
one
favorite
of the
scene in the
top for
movie.
sure in any animated movie. But not only
Yeah.
that, but I think there was like the way with this whole like it felt like kind of a platform game where you're going through each level. Like it felt like an early like NES version of the Ninja Turtle game, like
Yeah.
going from screen to screen and like
Yeah.
platform to platform is what it felt like. But
Yeah.
that whole thing on we also have to take in consideration like Leo hasn't fully emerged as a leader yet. Obviously, we see
Mm-hmm.
that at the very end. So the whole thing with like each turtle is like taking center stage or taking that leader role in each transition was pretty cool. And we see them like go like frame by frame into like each other's movements. Like that was really cool and really smart thing. And like I never pictured an action sequence happening to No Diggity, but it worked really well.
Yeah. Oh man, it was legit. It was my favorite scene,
Mm-hmm.
and it when I watched it, I was like, this just feels like like a new school martial arts movie,
Yeah.
right? And then later I found out that that scene they actually took inspiration from Old Boy, from
Okay,
that
that
same
that makes
scene where
sense.
it's the where he's taking everyone out in the corridor and it's the side scroll, right? And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like I thought about it there, and I just thought like this is just really good fight sequences for an animated film, especially in a film where you're essentially talking about superheroes. Like you can do so much that's just so ridiculous with animation, but they just stuck to, hey, we're gonna make a really cool fight scene and just like go through it, especially going from their first fight scene where it was kind of chaotic and everything was just kind of happening and it
Mm,
was more funny than it was action, then
mm.
going into these fight scenes where they're taking out just different like mobs at a time, and they're just very meticulous in how they're taking them out, and it's
Yeah.
almost like they're having fun, like, okay, now it's your turn, you lead. And the way it just switches between the turtles as they're taking them out, it was just such a good scene, legit one of my favorite
Yeah, it
fight
was
scenes
really
in like
awesome.
in any animated film.
Because I like that whole idea too. You brought that up. I was meaning to mention it, but when we see them first fight in the garage when they went to get April Scooter back, we're actually seeing them use their combat skills on other
Mm-hmm.
people for the very first time. So that's
Yeah.
why you see the hesitancy and it's like, hey, this is the first time we're fighting, and I all I have is a big stick. And you just see the only one who's like really fully trying to is really ready for it is Raph, but
Yep.
obviously because that's Raph, that makes a whole lot of sense. So I actually like because this whole thing is like you can be heavily trained and you can have all the preparation and all the skills you think are necessary to help you in those kind of sequences and those kind of scenarios. But in hindsight, the reality is that it's spontaneous and it's unpredictable. So it's like
Yeah.
getting that sense of hesitation, a little bit of that fear from them makes a whole lot of sense because me being in those scenarios where I'm like, okay, we're hitting pads, we're hitting the bag, and yeah, I feel
Oh
good, I
yeah.
feel confident. But then it's like, okay, you're gonna
You
get in the
get
ring
there.
with Eric, and I'm just like, like the
You
timing
forget
feels
everything.
weird, and then like yeah. The whole thing
Yep.
I like what Mike Tyson said. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So that whole thing, I actually thought that was a pretty smart way to include like the fact that they haven't used their training on live resisting people before, a
Yeah.
little subtle thing. But then once we get to like the no diggity scene, they're pretty confident in their abilities and they've been through the ringer before. And as they go through each one, we're
Mhm.
seeing them become more confident and more competent. Well, not exactly more competent, but just more confident in their abilities. And we're seeing like that fear dissipate a lot.
Yeah. One
I
thing
also keep going, my bad.
I say just going along those lines, one thing I really liked that they did also with those fight scenes that goes back to they had to have had like a martial arts expert there to go through like the fighting, because they also get hit. And that was one of the reasons I really liked the fight scenes in the Daredevil series, was that he would get hit and he'd get knocked down, and he would still like fight his way through, right? And I would see the turtles like get hit too. I'm like, okay, they're not just coming in and just like destroying everyone. In that no diggity scene, yes, they were, but throughout like the majority of the film, like they're you can see that they're still amateurs in what they're doing, right? Like you can see them get knocked down, get hit. I mean, I think one of them got like shot in the leg, or what happened to Zanto? He got stabbed in the leg or something.
Something with like
But
think like the raft through the sign, it
yeah,
ricocheted off a
and
couple
they
things
hit,
and
yeah, yeah, like they're getting hurt, and I think that just it goes back to like you realizing again that they're just teenagers, but they're doing what they can, right? And I just the fight sequences are that much better because of the early scenes where they're getting hurt. It's almost this expectation like they could lose. Like it's not like they go up against Superfly and you're like, oh, they're just gonna take them out. Like no, like this there's a very real possibility that they're gonna lose because they're just kids, right?
exactly.
They're still learning.
And I actually thought like it was I don't know why I always laugh at those like four mobsters that are going out there like Short Sharon, Toupee Tom, Normal
Yeah,
Nate, Bad Bernie.
their
I
names.
don't know why that just makes me and it was like as they were going to each one, it's like, no, you're looking for Bad Bernie. No, you're looking for Normal
Yeah.
Nate. No, you're looking for Toupee Tom. Oh
Oh
man,
man.
it was cool. We actually get to see Splinter throw it down too because it's been a
Yeah.
minute since we've seen him at that level. And not only that, but it felt like very reminiscent of a Jackie Chan movie. Like he's using props, he's using the environment.
Yeah.
Not only that, but then he gets
And
thrown
he's
into
like
the
falling down and stuff. Like
yeah.
yeah, very reminiscent of Jackie Chan, how his style of fighting. That was
Then he
really
gets to
cool.
use all their weapons too, and he gets like thrown into
Yeah.
the storage closet where their weapons are, and he starts taking them out. And obviously, he trained them in their weapons, so he would
Yeah.
be an expert at them. So I thought that was a cool way. And then they did it to the music they used was Scarface. I was just like, oh, dude, this is
Yeah.
definitely totally 80s vibe for sure.
I was so happy that they kept Spinner badass because I was kind of worried throughout the film that he was just going to be this like father figure that was just going to be strict with them, and they weren't really going to show like why he was so cool in the comic books, like his strategic thinking, and he was a martial arts master. And I was worried that they were just going to leave him as this like dorky dad. And but once that scene came along, and he came in and he just came off as a total badass, right? And yeah, that was really dope. I really like that they kept they still kept him like that dorky dad, but at the same time, you understand why he leads the turtles.
Definitely. And then we even got
Yeah.
a little bit of I think they included like a shot from when he was training them in martial arts. I think we get a shot of Jackie Chan in like Drunken Master or Snake in the Eagle Shadow. I couldn't
Yeah.
exactly see where it was from, but I'm like, I think that was like an
Yeah.
early Jackie Chan movie.
Yeah, there's got to be Easter eggs all over there too. And yeah, I think I think that was just like Jackie Chan's claim to fame, right? But there was also like posters, like martial arts movies posters in the
Yeah.
backgrounds, and obviously a bunch of other stuff that the turtles were into. But
Definitely.
yeah, like the martial arts background is just littered throughout this film in Easter eggs.
Which is really cool to see. Me being a martial artist, and that was one of the things that
Yeah.
really got me into the TMNT. It's just super cool to see all that come back. But
Hmm.
in the beginning, I was like, okay, so they're going to be doing this Ninja Turtle animated movie. Is Shredder going to be the main bad guy? And we've seen Shredder's. Not that I don't like
Yeah.
Shredder, but it's just we see Shredder so much. He's without a doubt the most popular
Yeah.
TMNT villain. So when the
Yeah,
whole
like
thing when
I don't know if people know any other like TMNT villains, because yes, you see a bunch in the like old 90s cartoons, right? But now it's like I feel like if you ask someone on the street like who fights them, they would only know Shredder,
Shredder, exactly.
right?
So that whole idea that they were going to be going into the mutant element also and talking about the other characters that exist in that world, I thought was a pretty smart thing to do in a way to kind of shift it from Shredder and the Foot. But the whole thing,
Hmm.
I'm going to talk about one of my gripes and one of the flaws in the movie I have, but we'll get into that. But it was pretty cool because obviously we got Bebop and Rocksteady, we get Wingnut, who we haven't seen in live action movies yet. Genghis
Hmm.
Frog, one of the punk frogs from the 80s cartoon.
Yep.
So that was pretty cool. Ray Fillet is also there. Mondo Gecko is also there. So that's just Scumbug, obviously. So pretty cool. With Leatherhead was cool too. Although Leatherhead and Wingnut I thought was a bit interesting because they're normally male in the comics and the other media, but here they
Mm.
were obviously female. So I thought that was an interesting choice that they made. But it was cool because we get to see other characters we haven't seen before and
Yeah.
introduce these characters to a brand new audience who may not have heard them. So, oh, I didn't know Leatherhead, I didn't even know Bebop and Rocksteady until this movie. So all I knew was Shredder before. So at least
Yeah.
like that part is cool that we get to see that.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I didn't know all of those characters, and those they were just so well cast too. Like obviously like John Cena. Um, which one was he? Bebop or Rocksteady?
He was
Rocksteady.
Rocksteady. He was
Yeah,
Rocksteady.
yeah. It just having Seth Rogen and John Cena as Bebop and Rocksteady was really funny. It works. Their voices just fit, right? And
Easily.
then the one scene where I forgot the name of the character that Post Malone, the one that was singing.
Ray Fillet.
That was Ray Fillet, and it's Post Malone and like singing and being ridiculous, like that. Just that it just really well cast, and that fit, and I thought that was hilarious. I was just cracking up
Mm,
when that happened in the theater. So, yeah, it was really good to see all those characters too, and they kind of have like little notes where you kind of like you catch what each character is saying, you catch a little bit of their personality. I like that at the end of the film they kept them around, so obviously they hinted toward another film with the after credits. So hopefully we get to go into those characters a little more. That'd be really cool to see. And yeah, I really like the whole mutant aspect of it. And then just to top it off with Ice Cube as Superfly, like that was so cool, right? And it that worked out. That worked out really well. What did
Exactly.
you think about that?
I having him as Superfly.
Yeah,
I thought it was perfect casting because obviously he has like those the interesting thing about Ice Cube and the whole thing with like I think of like that episode I think on Conan where they had Ice Cube saying like normal things, but obviously
oh
with his
yeah,
like with this tone of anger. So he was
yeah,
like, "Oh cat, cat," and then just like
yep,
making it less. So it's just like Ice Cube has this great balance where he can be kind of like that cool uncle or that cool big brother. And you see it at the beginning, he was like, "Oh dang, I didn't know there was other mutants." And then
right,
this whole thing,
yeah,
like when they were just like, "Oh, at a, just we're just I'm just thinking, we're just thinking, what if we don't really go along with this?" And then he just is like, "Well, that is gonna piss me off." And
yeah, yep,
he has this good balance where he can be kind of like charismatic in that sense of like that cool older brother, but then he can
yeah,
also be rage filled and very intense, like very
yeah.
very on the fly. No pun intended. I definitely thought that was perfect casting to hear him, and then the
Yeah,
whole. I thought it was super cool. His line when he opens the door of
the
the
band.
van with the
Yeah,
6 in the morning police at my door. And I'm
yep,
like, okay, we're obviously going to be doing more of the hip hop
yeah,
influence for the Turtles, but I'm
yeah.
loving it, of course.
He dropped another line from the song too, but yeah, I thought that was perfect. Like they had to have let him like do some stuff with the writing there, because I thought it was really well thought out. Like the lines and everything, it didn't seem forced. Like he became that character really well, and I really like believed that portrayal. It was really cool. Like if Ice Cube were a fly, this is exactly what he would be.
Mm-hmm. Or even how they included that whole like whenever he heard like a S or a Z, he did like this.
Yep.
Like I think he did that on Existence and Vaporize. I thought that was like a little cool thing too. He was honestly just perfect. I really felt like every not only him but just every member of the cast also did really well. I think in terms of vocal performances, either him or Jackie Chan were probably the standouts for me, just because they
Mm,
fit those characters and they fit that world so well.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. The standouts for me were the teenagers,
Well,
the
them
the
too,
the
but I mean,
turtles.
I think everybody
And
did well. But
yeah, I mean the director had said that he would just leave them in a room, the actors, and just let them riff off each other and just always keep the mic recording. And they kept some of that stuff in the movie, and because they were just naturally that funny, and he would just egg them on to try to make each other laugh, and they would just talk about stuff on their phones, and I think they brought a little of their personalities into the characters, and those are really like the best actors, especially when you're doing voice acting. You don't want any of it to feel forced, and all around the majority of the cast, I think that's what they were able to accomplish.
yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody knocked it out of the park in all honesty. Uh, only thing, as much as I did like this movie was really well, I do have a few gripes with it. One of the things that I feel is a bit of an issue is that connection that we don't have between Shredder and the Turtles and the with the Foot Clan. I think is
Mm,
kind of as much as people want to say, oh well, you want to do something fresh, you want to do something unique, but I think a staple of the lore is that connection between Shredder and Splinter and the Turtles. Like that's just one of those things that is, I think, a constant thing that you have to have, or at least be longing
mm,
for. And who knows, maybe we could have that somewhere down the line. But obviously, with Splinter being a rat from New York and not Yoshi's pet rat,
yeah.
who and that's how he. And I think it's just a bit of an issue because now it reminds me. And I'm not gonna lie, when this whole thing when he learned martial arts and taught the turtles through like YouTube and VHS tapes, or well DVD. They wouldn't have had VHS DVDs and martial art films. I thought that was a little bit like Michael Bay's first. Well, not the Michael Bay produced Ninja Turtle movie from 2014,
Yeah.
because Splinter teaches them martial arts through a book that he found in the
Yeah.
sewer, which I kind of had like those kind of vibes. And I'm like, that's not
Mm,
the exact vibe that I want to have from this movie.
yeah. I thought their take was funny though, and obviously that's what they're going for. The one gripe I had with it was actually the origin story. Just because the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles origin story was so closely tied to Daredevil, right? Where the whole idea of the radioactive waste falling, and that's how Daredevil got his powers. And the waste, like, it's implied that it fell into the sewers and they got the turtles, and even just the whole like references, like Daredevil fights the Hand, they fight the Foot Clan, like
Stick and Splinter, Stick and
yeah,
Splinter.
yeah. He's trained by Stick. They're trained by Splinter, and so obviously I kind of missed that connection. Daredevil being one of my favorite superheroes, but I do think if they were going for something fresh and new, this is a cool way to do it.
Mm.
I think they kind of wasted the character, the scientist that actually made
Stockman,
them into,
yeah.
yeah, they kind of wasted his character because he dies in the beginning, and he creates those the mouse, what are they called, the like
The Mousers.
the mousers, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, are we not going to see the mousers now? I'm sure they'll bring them in somehow, but those were some of my favorite like enemies
The
that they
Mousers are
fight.
freaking cool, man. I've always
Yeah.
loved. I want to see them live action. Seeing the Mousers live action would be so cool. But
That'd be cool.
I do have a theory though. I was gonna mention this, but I do kind of feel like Superfly was made maybe with a touch of Stockman's DNA. Because if you notice,
Cherry Curl,
because of the hair, not only that, but then he said I inherited my dad's brain and intelligence, and I'm like, how do you inherit his brain and his intelligence? Like that doesn't unless it's genetic. That's the only way I could surmise. So I think it was a little subtle nod to that.
maybe,
And
they
Superfly is still alive. So
yeah,
well, I mean him as a regular fly, he's still alive.
demutinized, I guess.
That's a smart way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he's still around, so they can definitely, if there's some way to turn him back into a mutant, I'm sure they'll figure that out.
For sure. So I definitely, that was one of the things too, because I'm like, damn, they really killed off Stockman. Stockman is definitely a staple of the TMNT lore and mythology. Yeah. So I thought like he wasn't gonna die. Or then when I thought about it in Son, I'm like, wait a minute, well, what if like he's actually, Superfly is actually like his son, or like maybe like his clone or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that's a cool theory. I like that.
And that's what I meant too, harkening back to the whole origin story, because I think one of the things that really makes this whole thing interesting and personal is that kind of pretty much that connection between the turtles and the Shredder. It's the turtles and Splinter and the Shredder. Like that just really makes it personal, and just makes pretty much like elevates the story and elevates their relationship with each other like that much greater, I feel like. And now to have him come in as pretty much like a mercenary is, yeah. I don't feel like it's gonna, like, this version of it is gonna be like that kind of stake and that kind of sense to it. Is this the only thing where, yeah, I'm like, it feels a little bit undermined in my opinion.
Yeah, there needs to be some connection there between them, because if he's just coming in as like a bounty hunter, yeah, like a gun for hire, it's not, I don't think it's gonna have the same feeling of I don't know, the enemy that is Shredder to the turtles, right?
Because I mean, my earliest memory of it was just watching the 1990 movie, and the whole thing is littered throughout that there's some kind of connection between the turtles and the Shredder. And then the whole thing with like Tatsu is asking him, he's all like, Master, why are you so concerned about these? And he's like, something you describe about them, something about their fighting style, something from the past. And then we see the payoff at the very end when Splinter calls him out and says, "You kill my master, Hamato Yoshi," and then he takes out the mask, and they're just like, it's him. And that, like, I feel like that really elevates. I was just like, oh shit, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like I said,
is that originally from the comic books too? Because I know in the very first series of the comic Yoshi, books, they like take out Shredder in the first series, and then they just move on from him. Then he comes back.
I don't know if like that exact one isn't from it, but the whole connection between them is what it is. Like I think they know who the Shredder is right away, because the Splinter trains them specifically to kill Shredder in the comics, so they know who he is right away.
That's true. Man, I should have reread that.
You need to definitely read up on the early Mirage comics. It's it's an interesting distinction between where they were starting dark and gritty, and now obviously everything is very kid friendly. Yeah. I think like that's just this like kind of
That
thing
had
like,
to have
yo, what
happened
the
with like
hell?
the shows and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
too,
once the toy
right?
line of the shows came out and there became pizza
Yeah.
loving cowabunga saying dudes.
They're on Nickelodeon.
Yeah. And one
Yeah.
thing, I think the other thing I thought was a little bit of an issue, it's not so much because I understand more of stuff happens that just makes the plot extremely convenient. But this whole thing of like when they confront Superfly about turning off the machine, and then pretty much like everybody else, all the other mutants are like, hey, yeah, we don't want to do this. I feel like it all just happens within a span of a couple minutes because remember that's essentially their big brother. Like he raised them and he
Yeah.
protected them and took them out when they could have died or they could have been research for TCRI. So I just feel like this whole thing like they wouldn't really turn against their brother so quickly. Like granted, we do see like when they're building the machine. We see like when Superfly is talking about their plans, they do kind of feel like they're hesitant. Like I don't exactly
Yeah.
think that they're are really on board, but I just don't feel like they would have right away been like, oh yeah, like we're gonna turn like within the
Yeah.
span of a couple minutes turn our brother and
Yeah.
try to stop him. Like I just feel like that was something was a little bit too convenient.
Yeah. What I thought was gonna happen is that they'd be split. Like I thought like Bebop and Rocksteady were gonna join Superfly and there'd be like this like half of them are against him and then we would get a final battle scene like that. But we
Kind of
got a
like
totally
it's kind of like a Civil War
different
scenario.
yeah, yeah, we ended up getting a totally different kaiju
and
style battle.
and even talking with that, the same thing where it feels a bit similar is at the very ending. Because all it took for the public to really be on the turtle side was for April to go on and say, "Oh, they're not the
The
enemy. It was
reporters.
that big kaiju monster is the enemy," and then everybody just
Yeah.
comes out to help. Granted, I mean, it feels very similar to like I definitely get feels of the first Spider-Man movie when
At the
everybody on
end
the
with the
bridge starts
workers.
helping them
Yeah.
against the Green Goblin. But at
Yeah.
the same time, like I said, it like stuff like that is a little bit too convenient, but I can forgive it just for that sake of everything else was so well done that obviously this doesn't have a whole lot of runtime. So I feel like it is one
They
of those
had to
things
move
like
it
you
along. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. They had to make it work somehow.
But aside from that, I think everything worked very well, and I definitely recommend this movie to any, especially as a turtle fan, a turtle super fan. I think
Yeah.
that this is a very well made film. And one of the things I think that was really a highlight for me, and something that, especially we saw this, well, I definitely thought a lot about No Way Home. Was we're starting these characters are starting to really understand and really internalize what it means to be a hero. Because in the beginning of
Hmm.
this movie, when they meet April, their whole thing on being a hero and taking down Superfly is because they want to be accepted by the
Yeah.
public. But then we see when everything happens when they're in Times Square and everybody is just like, hey, those guys are freaks, those guys are monsters. We're seeing them and they're just like broken down about it. They're like, dang, like,
Hmm.
we can't do anything to help people because they're always going to see us as the enemy or they're going to see us as these freaks or monsters. But then Leo stands up and says, hey, yes, that's true. Maybe we won't ever be accepted, but I still think that we should do the right thing and that we should help to defeat Superfly because that's the right thing to do. So starting to really understand and really internalize what it means to be a hero. I thought like that was
Hmm.
so we're starting to see their path to the progression and they're really coming into their own and saying, hey, like being a hero is not always going to be pretty. We're not always going to get what we want or we're not always going to have the public backing us, but we're still going to do it because it's the right thing to do and it's the moral thing to do at the end of the day. So I thought like
Yeah.
that's also like a cool way that they were making the story more mature and bringing it back into what they want, but also understanding like maybe we won't get what we want, but we're going to do what we should do.
Yeah. Do the right thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you put that really well, actually. Yeah, I
So
think
all
that's kind of what it comes down to, what it boils down to in the end. Like to get a really good superhero movie, like you want the characters to actually feel like a hero, right? Be it putting their life on the line, or just like that sacrifice, right? And this is just like uh them being all in on being heroes despite not getting what they actually want out of it.
exactly.
And yeah, that's I think that's just another facet of being a true hero,
Exactly.
and that works out really well for this movie, right?
Yeah, and going into it, I wasn't expecting the ending. It's pretty much taking it a new route where they're going to high school and they're just regular students. I think like that's something
Yeah,
Maybe in the past I wouldn't have thought worked, but the way it was all done, I think the payoff for it was really great. And I mean, they deserve it. Honestly, they do.
yeah,
So
they gave him like a super happy ending. I was like, oh, okay, like because they had already made this decision. We're not going to be accepted by society. We're going to do this. We're going to move forward. And I thought they were just going to stay in the shadows, right? And at the end, they're like, oh, we're going to high school now. I was like, oh, that's kind of strange, but I mean, they can do that. Like everyone knows who they are. It fits with the story that they portrayed. So yeah, it threw me off at the end, but I thought it was pretty cool.
yeah, like I said, I think thinking about it before, it might not have been something that I would have been into, or something that I would have thought, no, I don't know, this is a bit weird. But just because of that whole teenage aspect of it and everything that they were willing to do. Granted, it's not like they haven't done that in other media before, but I do think it worked for what they did with it. Like, granted, there was a
Yeah,
little bit of that. Like, I did think like they were just gonna at the end of it defeat Superfly and then creep and then just go back into the shadows or crawl under the manhole, kind of like they did in the 2014 film. But I think it
yeah,
was just an interesting way to kind of show, like, shake up the dynamic and shake up the lore and the mythology, and kind of like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen now. This is what they're going to do. So just like
yeah,
I'm just wondering, like, where does it go from there and what happens
yeah.
next? Like, do they go to college, or do they go to
Right.
Stanford? Do they go to Yale or Harvard?
Yeah. Yeah, they had their like OG like I am Iron Man moment from the first Iron Man, right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, this is me. I'm out here. You guys know who I am now.
yeah.
So yeah, and then even them like taking off the masks at the end and going out like that. Yeah, it was cool.
Obviously, we know Shredder is coming. I think that would be a
Yeah.
cool way to kind of see maybe if we're going to be doing something a little bit dark, a little bit gritty. It kind of looked that way with obviously him looking at New York in the rain and obviously in a very menacing presence. I think that that's going to be a cool thing. Maybe we're going to be seeing something a little bit shaking it up from like that funny, goofy kind of tone that we've had in this one. But
Hmm.
and then we know a series is going to be coming on, I think, on Paramount Plus or Nickelodeon very soon. But other characters I really want to see. So obviously, I don't know if you know the girl who was like the head of the TCRI, Cynthia Utrum.
Yeah.
There's
Wasn't she
characters.
supposed to be like an alien in the
Yeah,
comic books?
there's characters
Utrum?
in the comics
Yeah.
called Utrums.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
one of the most prominent ones has been Krang in like the 1987
The
cartoon,
one
and
with
then
the thing in the middle.
yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, we're speculating that she's actually an Utrom who has like an exoskeleton and controls it in the center, the stomach of the body. And it would be really cool if we see the Triceratons. They're a group of aliens from the TMNT world.
Yeah.
Agent Bishop would be cool. The Rat King would be awesome. Chrome
Wrecking.
Dome,
Yeah.
Metalhead would be cool too. So there's just all these awesome characters we can do and see. But I'm really hoping we get to obviously have like a just give me the Utroms and give me the Triceratons, because we haven't seen too many of them. So that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I don't know. I don't know who else we would have in there, but I just want to see how the Shredder storyline plays out.
Same here.
Honestly, yeah,
And if they're going to be trying to find a way to connect their paths towards each other, I don't think so, but it'd be interesting to see if they do
yeah.
try to go that route.
I mean, so far they've surprised me with what they've done.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be great.
So what do you give this movie out of 10?
Yeah, I think just being able to watch it and just enjoy it so much in theaters, and definitely one I will be watching several times. And there's just all these like pop culture references that I caught that I loved. Like I love all the anime references, especially the fight scene at the end. Like that is totally
Yeah,
Attack on Titan,
extremely.
they're like even foreshadowed it earlier when they were talking about the Attack on Titan drawing.
Hmm.
And obviously Donnie's into anime. He has his JoJo's Adventure shirt, and he has the Jujutsu Kaisen
Oh,
sticker on his weapon.
yeah.
So I mean, just how entertained I was throughout the film. I think there's very few movies that can do that for me.
Mhm.
And especially animated movies now. And like I have kids, I watch animated movies all day. And just this one is going to be at the higher range for me. So I'd give it a solid like 8.5 out of 10 just overall out of all movies that I've seen. 8.5, and especially foreign animation is probably one of my higher rated animations. Like I'd probably, as of right now, I'd put it just under the Into the Spider-Verse, right? And I don't know if you talked on this about the TMNT movie that came out on Netflix, the animated film. Like that one
No,
was really
we've been
dope
meaning to.
too.
I never got
Okay.
it because I didn't see Rise
Okay.
of the TMNT series. So when the movie came out,
Okay.
I meant to get into it, but
Yeah.
we'll definitely cover that
So
sometime.
the movie, I would put this movie on par with that movie. It was
Oh,
just it's completely different. Like that movie that came out on Netflix was like the animation style really took over, and it's definitely like a grittier story, and it's those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then this one obviously going in the other direction with how funny it is. But I would put it on par as far as animation style goes, and just overall writing. Just such a good movie.
wow. Yeah, it's funny because I actually would give it an 8.5 also. This is me being a
Okay.
big TMNT super fan and just somebody who loves the Turtles and with all the skepticism I had. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this movie. I don't even know if I'm going to watch it. But
Yeah.
honestly, everything about it was just great. And I just really like how they really explored that teenage aspect of the TMNT because that is not
Yeah.
something we've really seen at the forefront. Not
Yeah.
only that, but just this whole thing, like there was just so many nods and so much respect and admiration for the source material and for things that came before it. And I think just all that fit, and I think the personalities of each turtle fit very well. The voice performances, the freaking music was awesome. The
Yep.
animation, just everything about it, I really just can't say too much aside from just some few nitpicks with the story and some of the things that they did and plot convenience. But it was very well made, and I can't wait to see more of what comes next from it.
Yeah.
And the one actually, these two things I actually found as like a TMNT super fan, I just want to mention, but that where they go to talk to April after they get their pizza and she's interviewing them. You see like there's like an outro shot when you see in the
Yeah.
background the
Like
sign
the
that says the
neon
lair.
sign. Yeah.
It says the Laird. That's actually Peter Laird. He's one of the co-creators of the TMNT. And then April's high school is
Oh,
Eastman
okay.
High. That was Kevin Eastman. He's also the other co-creator of the TMNT. So
Oh,
I had to mention that as being a
that's
big
clever.
TMNT super fan. So the
Yeah.
minute they
You
said
you have
go
to have those nods, right? You have to have those
exactly.
nods to the OG creators.
Well, because they had the Laird in that was like the last part of the trailer of that very first trailer. So I was like, okay, cool. Are they gonna
Mm,
have some kind of nod to Kevin Eastman? And then when they say, "Oh, meet me at Eastman High," and I was like, "Yeah," and everyone's like, "What the
yeah.
heck is this dude yelling about?" Like, I'm like, "Ah, I know something you guys don't. You guys ain't true TMNT fans." But yeah,
That's funny.
definitely this movie is really good. Go give it a watch. We're gonna
Yes.
cover Blue Beetle next time, which is
Okay.
also a lot that we have to talk about, a lot to say. So go check that out. Or I'm sure we're gonna be able to entice you to go see it. So maybe just wait for us to talk about it. But thanks a lot to Eric for hopping in on today's
Yep.
episode.
Thanks for having
Hopefully
me.
we'll see you again sometime soon, my man. But thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys soon. Take it easy.